Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to everyone for attending this Audit and Governance Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd of July, 2025. And we've got the name of the committee right this time, unlike at full council. My name's Councillor Alan Platt, and I'm the chair of this committee. Councillor Mark Clifford is my vice chair. Members are reminded that the meeting is being recorded and will be accessible on the council's YouTube page. If you wish to speak at any stage, please indicate to me you wish to do so. When I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on and turn it off when you finish speaking. Please speak clearly and do not cover your mouth when speaking to make it easier for any lip readers to understand you. Can everyone ensure their phones are turned to silent? We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came in and congregate in St Thomas's Square next to the police station. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Michelle Beach, who joins the committee following her appointment at council last week. We will now begin the meeting. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from our independent person, Pete Ripley, and also representatives from Grant Thornton. Given the audit's only just recently started, there'll be a more substantive update at future meetings, so there wasn't anything much to report this meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Ben. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interests in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Okay, item 3, minutes of the meeting on Wednesday the 21st of May 2025. The minutes of the last meeting were included within the agenda. Are there any comments or points of accuracy anybody would like to raise? We're happy to approve the minutes. Can I have a proposal, show of hands, please?
I'll second, Chair.
And a show of hands, thanks. Good. Item 4, this is the payroll audit update. That's pages 11 to 24 in your meeting papers. The item is for us to receive an update from the head of service following queries raised at the last meeting. Can I ask Holly Walmsley, head of people, policy and partnerships, to present the report? Holly is joining us via Teams.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just apologise for being on Teams? I'm actually on annual leave today, so this is the reason that I've joined on Teams. And also, just to add, I don't know if Councillor Southern's having the same issue, the sound is very in and out, so we're only receiving sort of every third or fourth word that's being said. So I don't know if it's worth potentially somebody adding any questions into the chat, because I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to hear them. But I will endeavour. So this report is intended to provide an update on progress since the last time that the payroll audit was presented to Governance Committee. There were a number of questions that were raised in that Governance Committee that I'm hoping this report answers in whole or in part. Obviously, there will be an opportunity for anybody to ask any further questions if they don't feel have been responded to. So the payroll audit dealt with 11 risks that were identified throughout that process. And for each of those risks, there were a number of agreed actions. So set out within this report, we've highlighted where progress has been made on those actions and what has been put in place. There are some slight changes to initial actions that were identified. So, for example, having spoken with our payroll provider, unfortunately, they are unable to do an exception report. However, they have made other suggestions of improvements that we could make to the process. And one of those is enhanced functionality of the payroll system, which we have now put in place. So this is checklist functionality that essentially, as you go through the screens inputting payroll, it has guidance along the side of it and highlights which fields need to be completed and how they need to be completed, so that if somebody is going through that process for the first time or just as a reminder, there is a very, very clear pathway that they will follow. The only other thing that has not yet been completed fully was the payroll processes checklist update to SMT and SLT. So we are rolling out a programme of updates and additional training for managers on the use of payroll processes and systems. And also the agenda item which is through the SLA meetings with Blackpool Payroll Services, we have established an agenda and we have established an action log, but those have not yet been used, they've only just been agreed at the last meeting. So moving forward, those will be implemented. Everything else that was identified throughout that audit has now been implemented, but happy to sort of answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, Holly. Does anyone have any questions for Holly? Councillor Hayden.
I'm down as Craig Ainsworth, but does it matter? Is it this one? Oh, I'm here, sorry about that. Thank you, Holly, for the comprehensive update. It was really good and easy to understand. Can I just double check that the payroll audit, did it cover the whole of Chorley, including Chorley Leisure, or was it split up into various groups?
You're on mute, Holly.
Thank you. So it covered every payroll that we run. So we run 6 separate payrolls. We have a payroll to Chorley Council, a payroll to Chorley Leisure, a payroll to South Ribble Leisure Limited, a payroll to South Ribble Council, and then also payrolls for the 2 separate elections. So the audit did deal with the whole of payroll.
It's me again, Holly. Can you, therefore, when you're running these exception reports, can you tell which part of the organisation it refers to?
Yes, when we're running reports, we can identify which payroll somebody's been paid on and which payroll they're on. Obviously, some employees are on multiple payrolls because they have more than one employment.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks very much for that report. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks. I'm just waiting for a little bit of guidance at the moment. Councillor Southern's got his hand up, but he's not a member of the committee, so can we invite him to put his question in? Craig, over to you. Councillor Southern, did you have a question?
I do. Well, I can't hear a word. Holly, you're coming through nice and clear, but I'm afraid Councillor Platt, I'm having a lip read. To be fair, it's everything from within the chamber. Holly's fine, but I can't hear anything else that comes over audio from the chamber. Sorry about that.
I can put this a bit closer to me, but did you hear any of the other questions?
Not a word, but I'm lip reading you good and clear.
Right, okay.
It's to be fair, it's the amplified sound from within the chamber is not coming across on Teams. I don't know if you found that as well, Holly.
Yeah, that's the same issue that I'm experiencing. It's in and out.
We're just having a quick look at it now. I don't know whether it's worth maybe trying another microphone unit just to see if that possibly works any better.
I'm impersonating you now. Is this any better, Craig?
That's slightly better, yes.
Yeah. Holly, you okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I'm sure my name will be amended shortly. So, any more questions for Holly?
No, I'm fine with that, thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me, Craig and Holly. And thank you, Holly. I agree with Councillor Hayden. It's a very comprehensive update. I do have questions by points, but when I've looked at them, quite a few are sort of the same type of questions. So I'm just going to lump them together. Where we've done historic reviews across each of the points made, have we found other errors on top of the ones that audit initially found? And are we confident that we've got them all logged now? So if we think about point 2 on there around any significant gaps in record keeping for ex-employees, or point 3 around the centralisation and whether we've picked up employees now who don't have their DBS or their driving licence checks recorded. And point 5 on that, whether the retrospective exercise highlighted any further missed payments incorrectly. So I initially just want to clump all of them together just to understand if we found a lot more issues rather than the sample testing that Audit had completed.
Yeah, so I think the answer to that would be there are definitely examples that were not covered in this audit where there were issues. I don't think any audit could ever fully capture every issue that we would have with any system, especially payroll, which has multiple different aspects to it. An audit of payroll is only ever going to cover a relatively small part of it. However, the actions that we put in place do capture all of those issues. So, for example, one of the primary issues I think was highlighted by this was the record keeping. So it wasn't that the records didn't exist, it was that they weren't saved in the place that we would agree they would be saved. So there was still information being held on people's OneDrives, there was information in emails, there was information in the HR inbox. And so all of that information has now been filed. So employee records do contain the information that is saved elsewhere, and there is an ongoing programme of making sure that information is saved. I think just to clarify the point around sort of DBS checks and driving checks, we were only able to identify actually 8 records rather than the 12 that were originally stated. And of those 8, 7 had actually been completed or were not necessary. So obviously not every employee requires a DBS check. It's a relatively small number of people that require a DBS check. Where there was one that hadn't been completed, it's firstly been completed, and secondly, it was actually an employee who had exited and rejoined in a relatively short period of time, and the manager hadn't followed the process correctly. We've again amended that so that there is no flex in the recruitment process, so everyone has to follow the same process, irrelevant if someone exits and rejoins within a month, which was this example.
Thank you. And just a follow-on from, that's really helpful, and just a follow-on from that, though, where we have found overpayments, so for example, the leavers issue that was found, the first question is, are we claiming all of the money back when that's addressed? I think the one in the paper talks about 7 months of payments, but I assume that we've probably found others, and is it policy to claim back straight away? And then the second on that is whether we'd considered, I really like the monthly checks that have been implemented. I think that's going to be really helpful. Whether a staff in post list would form part of that as well. So whether that's given to line managers so they can just check monthly that those are the staff that they are paying against their budget.
Yes, I think I'm going to answer questions in reverse first, if that's okay. So the finance team already do a lot of work in terms of checking budgets with budget holders, and that is where we would expect to identify if there were any issues. So that staff in post exercise is already something that happens. In terms of overpayments, these are relatively rare. This is a very extreme example, this 7-month example. I can't think of another time when something like that has happened. Yes, we do claim them back. We have not identified through this process other examples of significant overpayments or indeed overpayments that have sort of come up through this. Like I say, it's relatively unusual for us to end up overpaying somebody, and it's certainly unusual for us not to know that somebody has exited the organisation, as happened in this case.
Okay, thank you. Just to push back on that a little bit. So if finance were carrying out monthly checks against the staff in post, we wouldn't have ended up with an employee that left 7 months ago. So I just wonder whether there's something that needs, and still being paid. I just wonder if there's something that needs to be firmed up around that. Where I've worked previously, we've done a list that's included the member of staff's name, but also how many hours they're contracted for, because some of those errors won't be just leavers, it will be people that have changed hours, and those haven't been adjusted, etc., through payroll. So it does feel, in spite of the assurances, that we possibly do have a gap there still, unless that has changed recently. Just in terms of part of the remainder of the report, there's a comment in there, and it's towards one of the end actions, and it says Blackpool payroll have found significant overpayments, but it's a comment that's made and then it's not addressed in the actions. So I'm going to lump this with another question. We've got a theme throughout the report about HR records retention. So it talks about emergency payments not being recorded or not being kept, and the Blackpool instructions as well not being kept by the team. the comment you made earlier about SharePoint and people keeping it, has that now been addressed? Are we confident that the HR team are keeping the records that they need to? And then I'm assuming then, therefore, that when Blackpool are finding significant overpayments and informing of such, that those are now being dealt with and that we're happy that they're being dealt with. Sorry, that is a bit convoluted, that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Where was the comment about Blackpool finding significant overpayments? Sorry.
Right, I can find it's towards one of the end actions. Oh, thank you. Page 20. Where's my
Yeah.
It's on here. Let's see. Yes, so it's the first column on page 20, third paragraph down. Although it is evident that the checks undertaken by Blackpool are identifying coding, tax, NI errors or significant overpayments. So the initial action on there is about the NI and tax, which I understand, but it's that comment in the middle which suggests that there's something further that we need to address.
So this would be during the processing. So Blackpool process payroll. So where there is an obvious input error or where something just doesn't make sense, Blackpool do a number of checks before they would pay it. So they would then come back to us and say, this doesn't look right, can you check it? So that's a normal part of the process. So that might be someone's been putting on the wrong scale point, the number of hours is wrong. So firstly, we would expect that to be picked up by the checks that we're doing. If that's not picked up by the checks that have been done within HR, it should be picked up by the checks that we payroll. So this actually says that it's evident that those checks are taking place and they would identify it and prevent that overpayment being made. So that is one of the checks that's sort of in place to make sure that we're not having those issues in the first place. Sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question, because I was looking for the column that it said in.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That makes sense, actually. I think it's just the way it's worded in that it suggested something else. It was around the HR records retention, so the emergency payments example and the Blackpool instructions that we've sort of learned from that, and we are keeping important documents where they can be retrieved.
Yeah, so it's been very clearly made clear to the HR team in terms of what our expectations are around record management and maintenance and making sure that they spend time on a monthly basis saving that information. Equally, when it comes to emergency payments, this is a measure of success of whether or not these actions are working, because we would anticipate that, well, ideally emergency payments should be zero. We shouldn't be making emergency payments. So that really ultimately is the target. And that we would anticipate that through the improvements we're making, the number of emergency payments we have to make reduces. So again, that should make it easier to make sure that all that information is being retained.
Thank you. And there is usually a cost to emergency payments as well, isn't there? If it's done, depends on how it's done, isn't it? So, just a couple more. That's all. Small ones. So the paper goes on to describe the destruction of the retention of records in the 7 years, but doesn't talk about whether we've gone back to do a retrospective exercise on destruction of records that we've currently got. So I just wanted clarification as to whether that's been completed as well, and we're happy that we're up to date with all of the current records being held and we know where they are. And then my final one was just around the quarterly meetings with payroll, and given all of the issues that have been picked up in audit, and notwithstanding, I know that you're incredibly busy and the team are, whether that needs to go to monthly initially, just to get some of these things further embedded, I guess. It was just a bit of a point. Thank you.
The first question, just in terms of the GDPR aspect, this was already in place, so clearly it wasn't something that was made available to the auditor at the time, but the GDPR, the data retention schedule for this team was already in place. The historic records, so the councils have two separate historic records, but surely we have an old system that is now essentially archived. All of those records are on an auto-delete, so they will just be deleted once we get to that 7-year period. The new employee files have dates on them, so that was already something that was implemented, and there is a clear process for those records to be deleted once they should be deleted. Does that answer both the questions? Oh, sorry, the second one was about payroll meetings.
Yeah, it answers the first question, yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably just to be clear here around the fact that the payroll service actually, in the main, aren't responsible for most of these actions. So the payroll service itself that we outsource to Blackpool, they just process. So the council itself, within the HR team, do all the inputting. So the majority of these actions are within HR. They are the HR staff team responsibility to do. Any issues that we pick up that are actually the responsibility of Blackpool Payroll and our SLA, we do pick up extraordinary meetings. So Neil and I had a meeting with them around a system issue that we were having very sort of over summer. They were very responsive, so we will book in those additional meetings. But in the main, they aren't responsible for the overwhelming majority of these actions.
Thanks, Holly. Councillor Hayden.
Yeah, sorry, Holly, I was just prompted there about the meetings, the quarterly meetings. You want to say about, although there is an admin arrangement in place, nobody was following up on the action points, etc. Could you make it a bit clearer within your feedback about who is responsible for administrating these meetings and who is responsible for making sure that action points are followed through? Thank you.
Yes, I think this was more that there wasn't an established agenda and minutes being taken and action track for these meetings. What there are emails following these meetings up where an action was agreed with the payroll provider, and there will be something to say who was responsible for doing that action, but the structure was missing. So now we've agreed with payroll what the agenda will be and what the action tracker will look like, but ultimately it will ordinarily be the responsibility of either the payroll provider or someone they identified within their service, or the HR manager who would be in those meetings and would then delegate appropriately within the HR team.
Thank you, Holly.
No more questions? Well, thanks for giving your time on your day off, or days off. Carry on and enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Right, no further questions. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 5, Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report, pages 25 to 44 in your papers. This item's for decision. We're asked to consider and recommend the committee's annual report to be presented to the council. Over to Dawn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as you said, this is the annual report of the Governance Committee. It's in line with best practice. CITFA recommends that we produce a report on an annual basis and then it goes to full council. So the report is attached to Appendix A and sets out how the committee is meeting its terms of reference, the meetings, the dates of the meetings and the membership, and like you say, all the reports that have been received by the committee. It also covers any training that the committee's undertaken and sets the work programme for the following year. In terms of the effectiveness of the committee, that's something we did earlier this year, and there were 2 items identified for improvements to make us compliant with the self-assessment from CITFA, and that was the appointment of the independent members, which we've now done. And it was also about the skills and knowledge questionnaires. So that was last done. We assessed the skills and knowledge of the committee in 2023. So the intention is to do that again so that we can look at any training needs and address them. We are planning to do it online. So you will receive an email in the coming days with a link. So it's okay to click it. It's coming from Jackie, just so you know. It is safe. And we're asking that it's completed by Friday the 8th of August. But if anybody wants a hard copy, we can do that as well. But once we've got all the responses back, we'll evaluate them and then bring back a training needs assessment for the following 12 months. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Dawn. Anybody got any questions for Dawn? Councillor Hayden?
Not a question so much, Dawn. It's just I think it's really well set out and very clear. So happy with how it's been done.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Yes, as it says in point 1, as chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, I'm pleased to present the detailed report, all the work that went into it. Thank you to the team, seriously. Right, we actually now need to move on to a vote to recommending the report be presented to full council. Can I have a proposer, please? Seconder? All those in favour, have a show of hands. Oh, you need to be quicker than that nowadays. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6, the Health and Safety Annual Report 2024 to 2025, pages 45 to 64 in your meeting papers. This item is for us to consider and note. Dawn again.
Yeah, again, thank you, Chair. So again, this is the second time we've brought this report before the committee. It's not specifically part of the committee's role, but it is part of the governance framework, and it's a form of assurance that, you know, for quite a high risk topic area, we thought it's good that you get the assurance about it. So again, the report is attached to Appendix A. It has been through to the senior management team first, so they've approved all of the content. It sets out all the work that's been done by the team over the past 12 months. So it gives that overall view of what work we've targeted our resources on, what's the plan for the next 12 months, what training has been delivered by the team, what systems and processes we're using, what policies we have in place. It gives all that overview really, and the purpose of it is to provide that assurance to members that health and safety is taken seriously. We can demonstrate that, and that it is a topic that is kept a really high profile. We do lots of training, and in the past 12 months, we've trained all the senior leadership team up to leading safely by IOSH. So they've all now certified at that level. So really, it is just like I said, to give you that assurance that health and safety is treated seriously, and we can give you the assurance of that our arrangements are robust. But happy to take any questions.
Right, we'll start with Councillor Hayden and I'll move this way if you don't mind.
Thanks for that, Dawn. Page 52, where you talk about the COSH reports. These are very important documents, of course. People need to know what they're handling and how to manage it and dispose of it, etc. And I just wondered why it wasn't linked to the procurement process. So when you're buying these chemicals in, that unless it's got an up-to-date COSH report, that procurement cycle can't be completed.
That wasn't the purpose of it. We're not saying that the documentation wasn't there. What we're saying is we needed to make sure that the staff who were using those substances were aware of how they should be used, and making sure that all the risk assessments were up to date and available for staff. That was the purpose of this work. So it wasn't that things were missing, it was just making sure that the arrangements were robust in relation to them.
It's my mistake then, I've got the wrong, picked up the wrong thing. But on the health and safety attendance rates, on the training, it would be useful to know what percentage of people had actually attended. You know, you've got a number in there, but it would be useful to see how many people you would have expected to have been trained, as well as undertook the training, to see whether or not, I know you said a rate's so low of people not attending, but I just wondered if you could just be more explicit in future about that.
Yeah, we've been asked that question a number of times, and there is difficulties with that, in that we would, as a health and safety team, we would need to understand basically everybody's role within the whole council and what their training needs are. But that's the responsibility of the manager. So we put the courses on, and it's up to the manager of that service to make sure their staff attend. If we make it clear in the training policy they don't attend the training, then it's up to the manager to source it elsewhere. So it's difficult for us to say we should have X number of members of staff trained in this particular area. That's the difficulty, because obviously we don't possess that level of knowledge. However, as it says in the report, we are reasonably confident that anybody who should be trained in particular areas are being trained either by the health and safety team or by other means.
But that, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, unless people are trained properly, then there is, cause for compensation, or either on the individual or on the company. So I thought it would be really key that everybody's learning requirements and records are up to date, to make sure that everybody is competently trained in the area that they're in.
Like I said, we have that oversight, but it's a manager responsibility to make sure that the staff that they're employing and that they're sending out to deliver their service, that they are trained in the right area. So it's their responsibility. We identify like where there is generic training across multiple services and try to fill those gaps. But ultimately, there will be other training other than what we deliver that managers are responsible for delivering, making sure their staff are trained in.
Be useful just to know that we consider that everybody in the organisation is trained to the right competency. I think that would be something that I would look for.
I think there's also a bit of a danger that Dawn and the team they're auditing it. The questions really might be best directed at the heads of service or team managers or whatever. And if there is a genuine concern, it's something we could probably refer to overviewing scrutiny. But if we can get the answers from the heads of department, that would be far better.
Yeah, I think probably when you go when you look at the accident tables, etc., then that would give an indication of whether or not people are trained with the levels of near misses and accidents that have occurred.
Is that the table which says struck by stationary object? Yeah, well, actually, I must say, we did actually pick up on that, and that is, it's a misprint. We have no rabid animals roaming around the streets, which you'll be pleased to know. Not a single one. Sorry. Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a couple of questions. The first ones are around, it's on agenda page 51, and it's in relation to the Solo Protect loan working. Could you advise what the Solo Protect lanyard device is, and is it a one-for-one person or is it a shared device?
We've undertaken a huge amount of work looking at the Solar Protect and the loan working arrangements across the council. So Solar Protect is a device that can be attached to your lanyard, and it's also available on your phone. So what we did was we looked at why the usage of the devices were so low, and it was found that in some cases they were shared, and so it wasn't appropriate. You know, there weren't sufficient numbers within departments. So like I said, there's been a huge amount of work undertaken on this. There's also dashboards, so we can see usage and whether the devices are being used. So as I say, Ange, who's our health and safety advisor, she's done a huge amount of work raising the profile of these devices, understanding the barriers to use, and we're going to spend the next few months analysing the data to make sure that, you know, our arrangements improve and that people are using the devices, because really it shouldn't be shared. They should be available to everybody. So that's what we've done, and we have seen our budget increase quite significantly because obviously we've had to order quite a few more devices. But yeah, that hopefully when I come back next year with the review, we'll have progressed significantly in terms of loan working.
I appreciate that, because as an ex-police officer, I had a device on my handset that if I pressed it, I had numerous colleagues. So my concern is this device similar to an emergency button that the police use? So if a member of staff is out in the community and, heaven forbid, is in a very vulnerable situation, is this a device where they can press an emergency button and someone is there or not? So that's that concern. The other thing is where it says device is not suitable for the user, have we got alternatives for the user to use, and who is ensuring that the staff are following this policy?
Right, so I'll take your first question first about the devices. The device has multiple uses, so it can be used to say, I'm going to such a place and I log in to say I've arrived, and then when I'm expected to leave at such a time, and then if it doesn't hear, it'll raise the alarm if you don't log out to say you've left that place. But it can also be used to trigger to say I'm in danger and I want some help. It then goes to a call centre who will then contact somebody within the council to escalate the call. So it has multiple uses in how it can be used. Sorry, just repeat, what was the second question?
So under paragraph 16, which is on page 52, it says that it was identified the low usage was due to a number of factors, including, and one of the bullet points is device is not suitable for the user. Is there an alternative for the user?
Yeah, so as I said initially, when we first started this exercise, there were only devices that were available on lanyards. We've now progressed to that people can have apps on their phone. So we're hoping that with the two options available, that will appease everybody and improve usage.
Thank you. And I've still got some concerns about that because taking it to a call centre isn't immediate, and if someone's faced with somebody with a knife, waiting for a call centre to then send help, I've got a few concerns around that, but I'll wait and see for the data to come on that. Going on to page Appendix A of the report, and it says accidents by person type, and we've got for Charlie 21 for members of the public. Is this assaults on staff by members of the public? And if so, this goes back to my solo protect issue that I've got.
No, that's accidents by members of the public.
Thank you, and sorry for giving you a hard time, Dawn.
No.
Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. In the work that you're doing around this, have you spoke to other organisations, and specifically I'm thinking Lancashire County Council because that's one of them. Is that the same device you're offering at Chorley Council now to staff? Because the Lancashire system does appear to be very good and very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was part of the work that we're doing. So first of all, we had to get the organisation to a good place and understand the needs of the organisation, which we've done. But we are also, like you say, benchmarking wider to see, particularly for, like you say, unitary authorities where they have much more loan working than we do, what their arrangements are. So at the minute, we're just waiting the feedback from that, so that's still ongoing. You can see from the plan we've put forward for next year's work, we are continuing the work of Solo Protect and loan working because it is a key risk area for our staff.
Councillor Beach again.
Apologies, Dawn. So I understand that staff get it. Are we looking to roll this out to councillors? Because a lot of us have ward surgeries within our communities, and certainly in recent weeks I've been confronted by a few irate. Whilst I'm strong enough to stand up to them being an ex-police officer, there are colleagues that maybe not be so confident. So I just wondered, is there a possibility this will be rolled out to councillors?
It's not on our plan at the minute, I'll be honest, to say it's not the intention to roll out to members. However, whether there's an option for members to piggyback on our contracts and pay them themselves, I'm not quite sure if that's something we'd need to look into.
Councillor Southern's hand appears to be up again. Are we happy to take a question he has? Craig, can you hear us?
Yes, no, yes, yeah, you wouldn't be, thank you. Message for Dawn. I'm going to pop on the back of point Michelle's made, actually. That's okay, Dawn. I've done a bit of...
Craig, can I just stop you?
Sure.
I'm informed that the only questions you may ask are if they appertain directly to your ward.
Could do. How shall I couch this question?
I mean, if it's a general one, I'm sure Dawn will be...
No, it's about the loan worker. It's just a quick one to Dawn, that's all. It's somebody to ask. Do the loan worker want to provide the man down? Technical question, I'm afraid, Dawn. Don't worry if you can't answer.
Yes,
They do.
Yes.
And is that in the form of no movement, or is that in the form of you ending up horizontal? Technical.
As you go down, I'm being reliably informed.
Right, so yeah, that's fine, that's all I need to know, just a query. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Cheers, Craig. Right, if there are no further questions... Oh, sorry. Councillor Brown.
Sorry, thank you. And thank you for another comprehensive report here. I just want to go to page 59, and which talks about the increase in near misses. And I accept that they're small numbers comparable, but there is an increase. It talks about South Ribble's increase being related, 2/3 of that being related to wheelie bins, and I wondered if that was the same for the Chorley increases, or if there's a different theme here that we just need to be aware of.
No, each council's got a different risk profile in relation to health and safety. So, like you say, South Ribble have the waste service, whereas Chorley doesn't. Chorley's is outsourced, so the waste near misses are not recorded for Chorley. But Chorley has the town centre, so we have more accidents, slips, trips and falls from the town centre. So that's why there's the difference between the two sets of figures.
Thank you, that makes sense. And then a final question for me is around paragraph 53 on the same page, which is a little bit worrying. So this is the one that talks about the new system being implemented, where it looks like the hierarchy isn't correct in it, so that reports are not being received by the health and safety team in the appropriate manner or time, I think. So that does suggest that from an implementation of the system, there are errors in that, how that's been set up. So that's probably something that I wouldn't mind understanding a little bit, as I know it's not you. Goes back to the earlier point, how that's happened, because there is a risk there then that we're missing. Well, it's creating a lot of work, I guess, if line managers aren't in the right place on the system. I guess that's what the problem is. And then it does say that concerns have been raised with ICT, documented in quarterly health and safety SLT reports. So my next question is, what's being done about it, and where does that currently sit, the responsibility to address that?
Like you say, it is a known problem. It's not something that is just affecting accident and near miss reporting. It is impacting on wider processes as well. It is something ICT are aware of, and my understanding is that either a solution or a new process is being introduced to counteract all these issues.
Can I that begs a couple more questions. Are there any critical systems that this is impacting? Because I haven't heard this through any other forum. And it does feel that there's been a learning here in double checking hierarchies before they're put into new systems.
I think, yeah, you're right, it is an issue. There's no critical systems. It is more about automating processes. But there is, it's visible throughout. So if there are delays in where the forms have gone, it's visible and it can be chased up. So it's not a critical thing if manual intervention is required. I suppose that's what I'm saying. So yeah, but it's something ICT are very aware of and are working towards fixing.
Can I just ask roughly how long this problem has been there for? If it's going into quarterly reports, that suggests that it's been a while.
I can only respond from a health and safety point of view. It's a good 6 months that we've experienced problems, but from a wider point of view, I couldn't say.
Okay, no more questions? Right, well, that report was for noting, so consider it noted, Don. Item 7 is the Internal Audit Strategy and Charter, pages 65 to 86. This item is for decision. We're asked to consider and approve the Internal Audit Strategy and Charter, and Jackie is going to present this one.
So we provided you with versions of the updated Internal Audit Charter and our strategy. The Charter members might be familiar with. This is a document that we bring to committee periodically. It sort of sets out who we are, what we do, where we're positioned in the organisation, the authority that we audit by, how we maintain our independence. So largely that document hasn't changed. The new global internal audit standards, we've made it a little bit more robust in line with those, but it should be quite familiar to you. The internal audit strategy is a new document. It wasn't a mandated requirement before, it is now. So what we've done is we've set out what our vision for the service for the next 2 years. So we've provided with a couple of strategic objectives, and we've given ourselves some actions in areas where we think we can possibly strengthen. And we've created these in line with the overall organisational strategy and our own sort of quality and insurance programme. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have on those two documents.
Any questions for Jackie? Councillor Brown.
Really good documents, a good read. So the only question I've got is a bit more generic. Is there anything in the charter that directly counters what SIPFA would advise?
No, nothing.
That's right,
SIPFA provided us with a lot of guidance to help us comply with the new standards, so it's all in line with SIPFA.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Hayden?
I think probably you had a blueprint, did you, that you needed to make sure that you got everything in there that needed to be in? No, that's it.
Yeah, we had a framework that we worked to make sure we made sure that all the mandatory requirements were met.
Our independent members, anything? Happy with that? Right. Given the time I'm going to put my name to this in my little scroll, can I move to a vote on approving the strategy and charter? Have a proposer, please? Over to my right. All those in favour, have a show of hands, please. Thank you. Item 8 is the Treasury Management Outturn Report 2024 to 2025, pages 87 to 104 on your meeting papers. This item, again, is for noting, and Neil's going to present this one.
So this is our annual outturn report that we bring each year in respect to Treasury Management. We obviously bring the mid-year report around November, and in between that time, as part of the budget papers, there's a Treasury strategy. I should point at this point that we have got training in the diary for October the 20th, so hopefully in respect to Treasury Management, if there's real detailed bits that you want today incorporating in that training, I'm more than welcome. If people want to ask that now or later on, we can absolutely delve into whichever areas are of most interest to people. In respect to the report itself, the key points really are the capital programme was reduced from what we'd anticipated at the start of the year. I think this is probably a follow-on from what members of the committee have heard before around profiling of capital expenditure, and we are working on that. I suspect that will go into the mid-year one because we're going to work to make sure we schedule it properly so that you will see it again in the mid-year one, and then hopefully the kind of impact of that being seen going forward. As a result of reduced capital expenditure and as a result of greater grants than what we were anticipating at the start of the year, the actual requirement that wasn't directly funded was £1.84 million, which was far reduced from what we were expecting. And I think the knock-on impact of that is seen throughout the rest of the report. The rest of the report reflects that essentially we've been able to maintain our debt levels at a fairly stable level during the year. They haven't increased probably as much as we anticipated because of those kind of utilisation of grants and delay in the capital programme. I would just point to a couple of things in table 3 on page 91. There's a couple of references within there, and I think both of them actually, if people remember back to the management responses to audit planning inquiries, there's a reference to a historic CFR error. I think we referenced that in there. This is an error dating back 10-15 years. We think it relates to the housing stock, but we're not quite clear as to what this relates to. We have now corrected that error to avoid continuing this into future years. That error was beneficial, so we'd previously overstated the CFR, so actually it's reduced the capital financing requirement, so it's been an improvement to the position. We've also had to make adjustments this time again, which we referred to at that time around IFRS 16 for the first time. So IFRS 16 was implemented from 1st of April 2024. I think it will be a key part of the audit this time, so I expect when we come back in future, we may be talking about IFRS 16 in terms of the Grant Thornton response. The main reason for that adjustment relates in respect of the vehicles which are part of the waste contract. So even though those vehicles are in the ownership of the contractor we use for the waste contract, under IFRS 16 we have to record those vehicles as within our asset register and within our ownership. So as a result, it requires accounting changes. It is accounting changes. Transactionally, nothing changes in the accounts. We pay the contractors as we are, but it's a change to this report. You won't have seen that on previous outturn reports. And then I think all I'd say on the rest of the report is it flows that debt has remained relatively stable. We are still managing quite a lot of debt in the short term because of interest rates remaining higher. We have started to see that reduce already as we've moved into 25, 26. That that has dropped quite significantly. We anticipate that to continue for a while. And in respect to interest receivable, as a result of those interest rates being higher, our investment of our working cash balances has generated in excess of £600,000 this year. Now, it isn't too many years ago, that was around £20,000, so the fluctuation over the last few years has been really significant. But overall, I think that's the key point. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions for Neil? Councillor Hayden.
Just a couple of comments, Neil, actually. On page 89, paragraph 13, I think it is. Yeah, it's just, I think that's a misprint. After 24, 25, it says Capita. It's capital. I was just thinking Capita is an organisation, so it might kind of like be a bit confusing for some people.
Yeah, sorry, it should say capital.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And the yield from Barclays is not very much, is it? So on page 94, have you got any plans to yield at 2%, Barclays? Are you?
Yeah, so that's a specific account we use for very short term. So it tends to be when we've got relatively small sums of money which we're investing overnight, which is why it's only 2%, but it's usually because it's very available to us at short notice. So you'll see that relatively small daily investment there. It's usually, if we know we've got a small amount of money and we're going to use that money tomorrow, we'll invest it overnight. So we try not to use it as much as possible, but it's the accessibility of it that's really useful to us.
On page 99, what are the colour codes, the LAS colour codes? What do they represent? Yellow, blue, orange, red, green. Is there any significance in the colours?
So if you see the Treasury Strategy Report from February, those colour codes are referenced in there, so you'll be able to tie it back to that report.
Okay. And also, could I ask you what the MUFG stands for? It's not in the glossary, so MUFG report, what does that stand for, please?
That's the name of our Treasury advisors, so I think it's Mitsubishi Group. It's just the company name.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Enjoyed this one again. So a couple of questions, don't worry. I think there's some good news stuff in here, definitely, right across the board, and I think it comes across really well, and congratulations to you and the team for getting that in the right place and managing that. There's a lot of forecasting goes on to get that right, isn't there? So really well done. My question is around that capital programme and that reduction. So we've obviously talked about the phasing issue and where those capital programmes sit within, and I'm wondering more about the risk around the increase in materials, etc. now that we're seeing, and that continued increase, and whether that's factored in for future schemes around that phasing. So the longer we leave it, the prices are going up and the original budget won't be the same, etc. Is there something in that to cover that risk?
I mean, I think in respect to the materials risk, that was a much greater issue a few years ago than we're seeing now. I think actually, in terms of the profiling and in terms of the cost risk, it's usually actually the cost plans, and as we're building a scheme, how we build that scheme. So I know recently I've been talking to the property team about the number of windows that you put in a building, and the cost can be inherently more because of the requirements around fire resistance, for example. Reducing the number of windows in a design might save you money. So I think it's more the cost risk of those kind of things, particularly in the bigger schemes that we've got around the town centre improvements, than it is necessarily about material costs. Sometimes some of our builds are also done on that kind of design and build where it's a set budget and it's built to that level of budget. So it does depend on the nature of the individual schemes. But certainly I've not seen, in terms of the commentary I've had from property, the materials conversation that we had following COVID in those first couple of years where it was absolutely the driver of cost. It's now about what we want from design, really, that's the driver of cost.
So is that in effect reducing the risk slightly from where it was? Because that sounds a bit more manageable, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's certainly a reduced risk from where it was a few years ago. And certainly I think in terms of our property team now, it is conversations about, we've got this budget, what can we do within that in terms of changing little bits around the architecture, which actually save those sums of money. And certainly they can be considerable sums of money from small tweaks at times. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm not saying it's not a factor because inflation is always a factor, but I don't think it's a huge consideration in the cost of the capital programme as a whole.
Any more questions? Just one from me on page 97. The external borrowing total, just over 86 million. Is that the actual balances, or is that the amounts that were taken?
Yeah, they are the balances that are remaining in those. So it depends slightly on how we've taken the loan as to the amount there is. So you'll see an example where it says £10 million because that is only paid on the maturity of that loan, whereas some are paid in instalments, and that's why you get different values in there.
Thanks, Neil. That's what it did jump out. I thought, what tremendous accounting to finish up with a nice round figure. Thanks very much for that. Any more questions? Or right, that item again is just for noting, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item 9, Member Standards Update. Pages 105 to 108. This item is for noting, and Taz will present this item.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So the report before you members is to provide you with an update on the number of complaints that have been received under the Code of Conduct for the year 24-25. As Chair has already mentioned, this report is for noting. So you'll note that obviously at paragraph 9, I do outline that there were 7 complaints received in total. 4 complaints did not require any further action, but 3 complaints were referred to the monitoring officer and obviously the IP, at which point they decided obviously that it's something that needed investigating. Out of those 3 investigations, 1 found no breach and no further action was taken. 1 complaint was against a parish councillor, and it was found that there was no material breach, and that in respect to that there was no further action required. And the 3rd investigation found that there was actually no action to be taken because the member had decided to resign. So we couldn't actually continue with that investigation. In terms of sort of behaviours, I do point out at paragraph 11 just there, obviously there are a low number of complaints, so it does demonstrate the good behaviour by members, so obviously it is a good news story. Obviously in terms of the actual report itself, I just wanted to outline a couple of comments that the independent person, our independent person, Peter Ripley, had made once he'd actually read that report. And he'd suggested that it may be something that we could look at in terms of actually amending the complaints process so that we include potentially something in there to say that if there was an incident whereby we had to basically just stop that investigation for a period of time because there was personal circumstances or something like that, then we include that as part of the actual complaints process, and I think that's a really good suggestion. So we'll look at that as part of a review, because we are obviously looking at the Constitution all the time in terms of review. So we'll pick that up in September, and hopefully we'll amend that, and that will come before members. The other point that he did make was around the social media protocol, and just basically, it's not only to yourselves, it's obviously a reminder to all members to say that obviously that social media protocol is there as guidance for members, and obviously members just need to be very careful when they are using social media. So those are the 2 points that I want to just highlight what the IP had mentioned. So that's the report, members. If there is any further questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Taz. Any questions? Councillor Hayden.
Hi, Taz. Would it be worthwhile when you say number of complaints, whether they were internal or external complaints, that is from the public or from the internal?
I can't give you that information right now, but I can in future, in terms of actually reports in the future, I can obviously identify that for you, yes.
Charlotte, thanks.
Can I just reiterate the comments made by Peter Ripley and reinforce particularly this concern with some of the complaints some complaints arise out of individuals not just taking a moment to reflect and maybe more importantly edit their responses. I don't know whether I'm able to make that observation, but I think it is worth noting for anybody using any form of social media or just replying in general to anybody. But I think it's really useful to have that summary report just to exemplify the fact that the number of complaints is relatively low, but that when they are received, they are taken very seriously.
Thanks, Charlotte. Did you want to come back on that, or are you happy?
No, I'm fine with that.
Quitting while you're ahead. Councillor Beach.
Hi Taz, excellent report as always, wouldn't expect any less from yourself. It's just for my own peace of mind, do we have robust measures in place when vexatious complaints are made, and is that fed back to the councillor if any councillors have been subject to vexatious complaints?
So within the actual complaints process itself, there is mention in there around vexatious complaints, and obviously the monitoring officer alongside with the IP would consider that and make a judgment on that, and the actual complaint itself is forwarded on to the individual member that's been complained of. So yes, they would be informed, and obviously specific action would be taken.
Any more questions? Nope. We're all happy. Good, 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 good. Just a couple for a change from me. How do we compare with our colleagues at South Ribble?
I think it's very similar, to be honest. In terms of numbers, I don't have the full details in front of me, but there is a standards report that we're going to the standards committee in September, so I can give you that information in more detail in September, perhaps.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much, Taz. No, it's just give us something to benchmark ourselves against a neighbouring authority. I think the only thing I did raise it before with Taz, the discontinuation due to a member resigning, it does give me a little concern that should that member decide at some stage in the near future to restand and get elected, they start with a clean slate.
So if it was obviously something very significant in terms of the actual complaint, I would imagine, you know, that would be something that would be referred to the police or something like that, and actually would actually get them from standing as councillor. However, I think one of the things that perhaps we do have in place is the fact that we do provide training to members. So any new councillors that start with us again, they are provided with that training, and that training is provided on a yearly basis as well for all members. But I suppose it's perhaps a quiet word with them.
Thanks, Taz. And I think probably just to reiterate something that Charlotte mentioned is that if members abide by the Nolan principles, there really shouldn't be any issues cropping up in this nature. But hey ho, right. It's Taz again. The Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act.
I'm pleased to inform you, Chair and members, that there were no applications under RIPA.
I can only express the committee's disappointment as Councillor Clifford.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is a question obviously around RIPA. I've noticed we've been, as the council, doing social media posts about our new investigated vans, you know, in terms of fly tipping and that. If you can explain the RIPA around the use of those, whether RIPA is needed or not for the use of these mobile surveillance vans. Thanks.
My understanding is that that wouldn't require RIPA, so that's not covert surveillance. So that's why basically we would require RIPA under that element.
Councillor Berry.
Hi, I noticed when I've been attending meetings that
we sort of even just dismiss repair as insignificant because we're not actually doing, you know, as a fashion now, if that's the right kind of word, to not use surveillance, but actually significant growth in informal surveillance, mainly, and it could be possibly people that live in our properties, you know, with the door ring bells and household CCTV. And I just wondered if we got some grasp of the risk that has if information is taken without permissions, if there's inappropriate surveillance happening, and then it's used in the legal, you know, when there's a problem arising. I just think it's a whole area we should be looking at. Sorry, I couldn't make that clear. I hadn't prepared what I was going to say about it, but it is significant. People, you know, if they're private householders, they're not just looking after their own garden gate. It goes, I think sometimes it goes beyond. And if that's in our properties, you know, is there a policy in place to say, we're giving you permission and this is how you construct your CCTV or where your doorbell is, so that it's clear that we're not doing anything we shouldn't be doing.
So when it comes to individuals obviously having ring bell or CCTV within their own property, obviously that's their responsibility, you know, and obviously the ICO would get involved in respect to that. I take your point in terms of obviously our properties, but obviously those tenants would have that responsibility. So it'd be the responsibility of that tenant to ensure that they are compliant. It wouldn't fall on the council.
Could I just add to that then? Obviously, perhaps in public protection, we might be encouraging people to record, you know, using CCTV or those doorbells. And I just wondered if that was an area that we were up to speed on.
I can't actually give you sort of specific information around that because I'm not aware, but I can look into it for you and report back.
Thanks, Taz. Any more questions for Taz? I think I should point out that there are other doorbells available in addition to Ring, just for the sake of equality. I think also I had read somewhere where people can actually register their doorbells with the local police. I don't know if that's something that we could possibly advertise to tenants.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be encouraging, like I say, but the process has to be in place. Yeah, brilliant.
I'll leave that one with you then, Taz. And I think item 11 is the work programme on pages 109 to 110 on your meeting papers. Ben's going to present this one.
Yeah, it's just the usual work programme of items that will look ahead for the remainder of the meetings for the year. Also covers some training aspects. It is there just for information. It does and can change through the year, and it's obviously open for any suggestions from members for what might want to look at later in the year. So it's just open for committee, really.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions on the programme? Nope. Okay. Item 12. Any urgent business previously agreed with the chair? There is none. You'll be pleased